good day. I don't know if I should refer to the morning or afternoon because it's about noontime. So good day, everybody, and thanks for coming to our presentation. With my colleague Emel, we are going to talk about the research we've done on reducing fuel emission and enhancing sustainability service level in maritime shipping. I start talking a bit about the background of the research, what was the motivation of the research, why did we do that. We go through a rather detailed explanation of the mathematical formulation and the problem you're solving. We'll talk about the methodology we have adopted in this research, and I will then hand over to Emel to take you through the experimentation, results, and conclusions, future research. This research is related to a European funded project called MiniChip, which we are leading at Brunel University in collaboration with two industrial partners, shipping company and software development company who is expert in developing maritime solutions. The project started last year, and it's a 4-year project, so we are now at the end of its first year. It's about minimizing carbon footprint in maritime shipping using mathematical modeling and developing decision support systems using the operation research techniques. And the main focus of this research is about analyzing the trade-offs which is involved in minimizing carbon emission and fuel consumption, because the current trend in minimizing fuel consumption in maritime shipping is usually focused on playing either with speed, so speeding decisions and slow steaming is widely adopted by shipliners and shipping companies in order to save fuel, but at the same time, as you can well imagine, it will prolong the journey time. So more ships will be required in order to deliver the same level of cargo or handle the same level of cargo around the world. And shipbuilders have started to solve part of this problem by building larger and larger ships. So that's the current practice in the maritime industry. And considering the huge and significant role of maritime shipping and vessels in global emissions, it's responsible for 3.3% of global greenhouse gas emissions. It has a huge role in global emissions, and we feel that there is room for further improvement of this level of carbon emission and carbon footprint by better scheduling and better deciding about ships' routing and speeding decisions. That was the origination of this idea. There has been a number of work in the literature deciding about optimal speeds of ships along the route. When we assume that port times are deterministic, there is a dynamic programming approach which can determine optimal speeds of a vessel along a fixed route in polynomial time. The problem is that port times are subject to significant variation. A vessel which is supposed to be serviced at a port in 10 hours, sometimes it takes 20 hours, 30 hours, even a few days, because of so many factors which are outside the control of port operators or shipping companies. So in reality, this problem is a stochastic problem which needs new solution techniques and effective and efficient solution techniques that can be used in commercial decision support tools which can be used by port operators and shipping companies. In a quick look at the trade-offs which is involved in minimizing fuel emission, we can easily feel that if you want to increase service level, and by service level we mean probability of arrival at all ports within the predefined or pre-agreed time window with ports. So if a ship arrives at all ports within its agreed time frame, we call it 100% service level. But if it is late in some ports, part of its service level is degraded. And vessels and captains in this situation, if they are delayed in one port, they are advised to speed up in the subsequent leg in order to make up for the delay they have made in previous legs. So in order to increase service level, vessels tend to speed up, which will need more fuel to be consumed. And the relationship between speed and fuel consumption is a function of variable, a wide range of factors, and it's in general a function of power of 2, 3, or even 4 of the vessel's speed. So in a way, if a vessel wants to increase its speed by 10%, it needs to consume 30-40% more fuel in order to make up for the delays. So we can see that the relationship between service level improvement and fuel consumption can have a trade-off like this. And if we want to incorporate cost, so far we have detached fuel consumption from fuel cost because we argue that cost and fuel consumption are not the same thing. Fuel cost is a function of a number of external factors, prices, taxes, and subsidies that different countries pay for fuel prices. So fuel might have different prices around the world, but 1 liter of diesel generates the same level of CO2 wherever it is consumed. So price and fuel consumption are not the exact same thing. Besides, there are a number of other factors. So we have separated them from one another. And if we want to incorporate cost as well, we may end up with a curve for the trade-off. That's something that we want to explore in this project. So here's the problem we address. We assume fixed roads along N ports in a road. So we have a vessel calling at N ports along the road, and we have uncertain port times, and we have a fixed time window for the arrival at all of these ports. We define the difference between the latest and the earliest arrival times as an indicator of the tightness of this window. So if ports allow ships to arrive at a flexible time, we call it a loose tightness, or if the window is too tight, we call it a very tight time window, which will affect the results, as we'll see later on. The vessel can sail at a range of speeds from minimum, which is the most fuel economic speed, and it's slightly different from the most economic speed, because in economic dimension, the cargo load and a number of other factors will be taken into account, but we assume that the range is within a minimum, which is the most economic fuel efficient speed, and maximum, which is a function, a technical characteristic of the vessel. And if the vessel arrives early at the port, it has to wait, and during the waiting, the vessel will need to consume a basic level of fuel for generating its power, and if it is a reefer vessel carrying temperature-controlled cargo like fresh food or vegetable, the level of basic fuel is substantial, so the longer the vessel waits at the port, the more fuel it will need to consume. But it's different from the fuel consumption during sailing. And the objective is to minimize fuel emission and maximize service level at the same time. As we have discussed, these two objectives normally cannot be achieved at the same time. Here is the mathematical formulations and notations. I don't want to go through them one by one. The most important factor that makes the problem a stochastic problem is this parameter vessel's port time at the J port of call, which is a random variable and follows the assumed probability distribution function. Assuming that the first port ship starts at time 0, the time that vessel departs the first port is equal to the time it took at the port, so the port time in the first port, and through this recursive equation we can calculate the time that the vessel arrives at each port and the time it departs each port. The time it arrived is a function of the time it departed previous port and the journey time, which is a function of its speed in the preceding leg. And the time it departs a port is determined by the time it arrived at the port plus the port time at this port. For the fuel consumption, we've adopted this empirical formula from the literature, which is a quadratic equation. As I said, there are a number of other examples of relationship between fuel consumption and power of 3 and 4 of speed, but we've adopted this one, which is an established equation. So the fuel consumed during the overall journey is summation of the fuel which is consumed during the legs during the journey and the time which is consumed when the vessel is waiting at the port. And the waiting at port has different status. It could be anchorage state, it could be berthing, it could be drifting state. So different status can be attributed. But for the sake of simplicity, we assume in all statuses the basic fuel consumption is the same. So it's basically the equation that calculates the fuel. And for service level, we assume that service level at each port is a binary variable, which is either 1 if the vessel arrives before the earliest allowed arrival time, before the latest allowed arrival time, in other words, within the time window which is allocated to the port, or earlier than that, and is 0 otherwise. If it loses its time window, it loses part of its service level. And the sum of the service level across all ports and average of this will determine the overall service level of the journey. In order to compare our results and to have a benchmark for comparison, we have defined lower bound for fuel consumption and an upper bound for service level. The lower bound for fuel consumption is achieved, the minimum fuel that a vessel can consume is when it sails at the minimum speed along all legs and waits and spends the least possible time at any given port, which in other way is the lower bound for the port time at the given port. So if this ideal situation happens, ship can sail at minimum speed at all legs and spends the minimum time at all ports. It consumes the minimum amount of fuel. So it's lower bound on fuel consumption. For service level, we first calculate the maximum achievable service level for each and every port by assuming that if vessel sails at maximum speed at all legs, what is the earliest time it arrives at any given port? So this equation tells us the earliest possible arrival time for the vessel at each and every port, sailing at maximum speed at all preceding legs and spending minimum time again at all preceding ports. So if this minimum or earliest time is less than the latest arrival time, latest allowed arrival time at a given port, we consider it as maximum service level equal 1. So we say, theoretically, it is possible to achieve 100% service level at this port and 0 otherwise. And by averaging these service levels, upper bound service levels, we come up with an upper bound service level for the overall journey. Now, we have now 2 basic research questions. We set up all these scenarios in order to test 2 fundamental things. The first thing is that we want to know how does port time uncertainty affect carbon emissions and service level. That's the basic question we have. And the second question is, how sensitive are emissions and service level to the tightness of time window? These are the 2 sources of uncertainty in our problem. Port time uncertainty and tightness of arrival time window, which is defined usually by port operators. In order to do our experimentation, we devised a simulation optimization evolution strategy. I don't go through its detail, but because of the nature of the problem, we felt it's an appropriate solution technique for our problem. For the evolution procedure for generating neighborhood solutions, we have adopted 4 strategies, and for each solution we have a vector of n speeds along n different routes, and we can either invert a part of it or swap to part of the solution, assuming that the speed is between 14 and 20 knots or nautical mile per hour. We can have a speed vector like this, 14.5 in the first leg, 16 in the next leg, and so on and so forth. So by playing with different combinations and different sequences of these solutions, these speeds, we generate neighborhood solutions, and in order to avoid getting trapped in local optima, we allowed speed alteration. All other these parameters just play with the existing solutions. They won't change anything fundamentally. But this speed alteration is to randomly change one speed to another speed at random in order to avoid getting trapped in local optima. Now I hand over to Emel to talk about the experimentation and results.
So we have the problem settings, and now we basically have 2 parameters that would affect our performance in terms of fuel consumption and in terms of service levels. And in the experiment design, we have considered the lower bounds as Afshin has described, and the upper bounds. And then we have generated 420 data sets where we kind of compare 2 different routes. So this started with one of our key references, Song's paper on Maersk's Pacific route, which we will show you shortly. And then Minichip project was able to work with Aktas, which is one of their partners, which is a shipper in the Mediterranean. So they have a shorter route in comparison to the Maersk route, which we call as Pacific route. So we have a longer route, which is the Pacific route. We have a shorter route, which is the Mediterranean route. And for each route, we manipulate the tightness in arrival windows. So how wide this interval a ship can arrive at a port, and how long it will take a ship at the port. We would manipulate the uncertainties in these parameters. So we basically have 3 levels of uncertainties for tightness and arrival times. It could be high tightness, and what we do here is we manipulate, again, the size of this interval, and we divide it as high tightness, which means they have a little time, they have a smaller time windows to arrive at the port, a medium tightness, which is larger than the high tightness case, and the low tightness, which is like the ship can arrive at the port with a relatively larger time windows, and maybe making these slow speeding decisions make sense. slides for port uncertainty, and here low port uncertainty means that we are better at estimating how long the ship will spend at the port. It's relatively a smaller range, and we have a similar setting here, so we have low port uncertainty, medium and high port uncertainty, and whenever we have a high port uncertainty, it means that it can be anywhere between minimum and maximum levels, which is like much larger than in comparison to medium and low. And we have port time data from literature for the Pacific route and from the shipper for the Mediterranean route. So we basically manipulate like what happened if instead of 8 hours the ship spent 8.5 hours, 9 hours, or 20 hours in a port. And then we have a population size equals n for the stochastic optimization, and we evolve solution time per problem 10 times n seconds. So these could be optimized as we progress into the research. And then we evaluate the fitness of solutions. So these are average fuel consumption and service level of 30 simulations. So for example, for each problem with a given tightness and a given port uncertainty, we would have 10 simulations and then take the average of fuel consumption and service level for them. These are the routes. This one on the left-hand side is a Pacific route starting with, I might be able to read, starting with Taiwan, then going to Hong Kong, and stopping in Shanghai, and ending in Long Beach in the States. And then we have the Mediterranean route that is pretty much going along the Mediterranean Sea for the shipper that's in the ship project. So we basically have two types of routes, longer route, shorter route, and three types of levels for tightness in arrival timing loss and for port uncertainties. And then we compare some of the results that we have for each port uncertainty and tightness in arrival times in the Mediterranean route and the Pacific route. So in the next following slides, you will see always on the x-axis the port uncertainty that is varying between low, medium, and high, and the color-coded bars are the tightness in arrival times. So for example, for the Mediterranean route, levels. Again, it makes a difference for tightness and arrival time windows. That the lower tightness we have, the higher service levels we can have, because we would be able to make it to the port before the latest arrival time in the port. And in terms of journey time, again, these two parameters make a difference. If we have higher uncertainty in ports and lower tightness in arrival times, then we will have smaller journey times. So as the tightness in arrival time windows increases from low to high, then we have to be there at the given time window. So if we increase the time window, then we have more time to travel. So this is again in line with our expectations. So for both the longer route and the shorter route, the tightness in arrival times makes a difference for the journey time for given port uncertainty levels. So what can we conclude from all these? We have seen that the main barrier to reduce fuel emissions is these high port uncertainties. It really makes a difference for shippers to make a decision. And it becomes more critical for shorter routes because there is less time and less distance to cover up for any delays in the port. So that is in line with our expectations. And if it would be possible to collaborate with ports, negotiate with them for them to allow relaxed time windows, meaning longer time windows for the ships, then steaming strategies would become more attractive to the shippers. And what we will do next is to experiment with more routes, because at the time we only have two routes, one from Mediterranean and one from the Pacific route. We did not consider, for example, the effect of rerouting here. Sometimes shippers just decide to skip the port if they are delayed beyond a certain level, so their penalties would just be prohibitive to make it to all ports, so they might skip. So we haven't looked at this effect at the moment. And one thing that would really benefit our research would be the causes of these port uncertainties. What is it that makes port not be able to deliver service in the promised time? And at the moment, we are using a generic fuel consumption profile for both routes, but we know that for shorter route, it may be a smaller ship that's sailing, so we are looking for using less specific fuel consumption for the future. Okay, thank you very much for your attention. Any questions? Comments?
Yes, it is. Yes, it's a good question. I should have emphasized this in presentation. The way we deal with the multiple objectives is to take all of them into account and to deal with the whole Pareto frontier. We do not use weighting approach to combine them together. So we deal with them separately, and in the multi-objective evolution strategy that we have used a non-dominated sorting approach which takes into account each objective individually. Yes. Thank you. Yes.
The second question is it's pretty restricted. So at a certain level, is it possible to skip port? Or if you don't manage to within the time window?
Right.
What is the real problem? The real situation. If the ship arrives after the time window.
What happens in reality? In reality, it depends to a number of factors. How powerful is the shipping company? For instance, if it is Maersk, Maersk has share in majority of major ports around the world. So probably nothing will happen to Maersk if they are late. Although they are not. They are one of the best performing shipping companies in the world. But in reality, if the shipping company is not that powerful and the port is very powerful, for instance, if you're talking about the port of Rotterdam, and a small company is late, probably they lose their slot and they will either have to go to the next port and deliver their cargo there and use sort of feeder service to deliver and distribute the cargo back to the original port. That's something which happens in reality, if this is the main point in your question.
So in this case, it was more companies that this is in most respect. So the service level should be one, some of
Yes, the less power you have, the more you should strive to be on time. And we have recently observed another interesting area to explore further is that in approaching ports, usually congested ports, what happens is usually a very tough and ruthless competition between the vessels. When a slot becomes available, and a number of vessels are late, they start speeding up to the maximum, sometimes beyond the maximum visible, technically maximum speed in order to arrive at that slot. And only one of them gets that slot, and the rest have already just wasted their fuel. So if we can take this equation, this scenario and this competition into account, there will be more room for even further fuel saving.